What's the most messed up thing a celebrity did? Story 1. Ian Watkins, lead singer of the band Lost Prophets, essaying babies is hands down the worst thing a celebrity ever did. He got held prisoner in a cell last year and stabbed in the neck, was apparently screaming for his life. Couldn't happen to someone more deserving. Hope he spends every day there in fear of it happening again. Just to point out, Ian H. Watkins is a singer in the band Steps. Seems like a decent bloke, and has never been accused of anything bad regarding children or people under the age of consent. He has had trouble online as some people have mistaken him for the other Ian Watkins and received a public apology from E! Entertainment after they mistakenly used his photo in a story about the Lost Prophets singer. Whether it's true or not regarding Drake, when some folks are like, why did Kendrick call him a pedo on a song instead of going to the police? This is why. Joanne Majelix, an ex-girlfriend of Watkins, recalls him displaying multiple graphic images with minors or drug paraphernalia as early as 2010. Appalled by the content, Majelix had made multiple complaints to South Wales police. Though very little action was taken at the time, Majelix was one of 6 people who had spoken to the police in regards to Watkins' conduct from 2008 to 2011. In 2010, an Australian woman had also come forward accusing Watkins of assaulting her child, though the allegations were not investigated any further by authorities. Absolutely disgusting how numerous credible people accused Watkins of heinous crimes and they were barely investigated. Had a meet and greet with the band 1 month before his arrest. I remember every detail of the day, the t-shirt he was wearing, the songs they played for me and my mates, the feelings I had when the news broke. If they ever create specific memory loss drugs, I'll happily partake. The police in Wales are also to blame for this, in my opinion, for their inaction and incompetence. One of his ex-girlfriends reported him to South Wales police multiple times after he showed her graphic images of minors in 2010. Nothing was done. It's partly because of them he was allowed to continue on. It's partly because the children were R-worded. If they took that complaint seriously and did their goddamn jobs, he might have been stopped earlier. Police, no matter where you are, one thing is consistent. They're freaking useless. Story 2. The Kennedy family lobotomized their daughter over mood swings and seizures and locked her away in a care home. My grandma was a registered nurse and took care of her. She was at St. Coletta in Jefferson, Wisconsin. My grandma said after the lobotomy she was like a 2-year-old. My grandma believes the Kennedy family is cursed because of this. The dad never once visited her. Her mom, Rose, I believe, visited her about 20 years after the lobotomy. I know that my grandma said that after Joe died, it was then that the family started visiting her. The nuns at St. Coletta became her people. It's such a sad thing, they literally threw her out because she didn't fit the mold, and all because she was hyperactive. Not the whole family, just Daddy Joe Kennedy. He didn't like that she might be promiscuous, not that the rest are saints. Lots of alcoholism, Mary Jo Kopechne, R-word charges, the list is so long you could write a book or two. Kennedy Babylon, for instance. RFK Jr. and his family mistreated his first wife so horribly she ended up committing suicide over it. Short version for those that don't know, imagine you are the queen of a small nation, but you are treated like a servant. You have nobody to turn to for help since you're the queen. The king and his family are the greatest people in the world. How could you ever complain? The king goes out to speak with the citizens for weeks at a time, and when he comes home, he just picks up the prince and princess to whisk them off to a vacation to another kingdom. You get left behind without a second thought. You're supposed to be a part of the family, yet every time you should be there, you're forced out like you don't belong. And that's what they wanted, to make sure you know you don't belong. That you're not wanted. That you have nowhere to go because if you left him, you would be seen as the villain that nobody wants in their kingdom, because this great king somehow wasn't good enough for you. Screw that family. Screw them in their faces with a cactus. It's speculated that her mental health issues were caused by the doctor being late to the birth and the nurse forcing her mother to keep her legs closed and delay the delivery until the doctor arrived, causing extended time in the birth canal, cutting off oxygen to her brain. But it's also unclear, to me, I don't know all the details, if she actually had mental issues at all, or if she was just a rebellious teenager who her father felt he needed to control in order to protect the family's reputation. I hate what they did to her. I do feel like this is warped a bit through modern perceptions of the procedure. She got lobotomized in 1941 when it was still a widely accepted procedure for the treatment of psychiatric issues. Lobotomies fell out of favor in the early 50s when antipsychotic medications became available. But it's not like they sent her in for an experimental procedure done by a lunatic with the intention of crippling her. Sometimes medical procedures fail. The family's treatment of her after the procedure failed is disgusting, though. Story 3. Travis Scott got mad at his former manager for having a seizure at the recording studio, left the studio instead of getting him medical help, then proceeded to fire him. And let's not forget about Astroworld. It's freaking sickening that some celebrities are still allowed to be famous and rich after crap like this. Record labels literally reward them for criminal/crappy behavior by allowing them to keep making music, money, and fans. I hate it. Definitely just a cash grab, if not insanity. Sad that they're even allowed to use their millions of dollars to get away with horrible crap that they've done, too. He majorly creeps me out. That anyone would still be a fan after he sat there and hummed while the bodies were being carried out is something I'll never understand. As someone who has no clue what you're talking about, can you tell me what you're referring to? A few years ago, Travis Scott held an Astroworld tour to promote his most recent album of the same name. At this concert, he incited the crowd so much that people were trampled to death, and he didn't care. There are plenty of instances of him telling concertgoers to send it too hard, and them getting hurt. In an interview, I believe there was a clip of him saying, "If you don't die, you don't really care enough about the concert," or something to that effect. He's a real piece of crap. You left out the part where he encouraged fans who didn't have a ticket to jump the fences. Also left out the part where he got mad at a guy for being on the stage that was hired to film him. On the stage. Also the fact that he claimed that he didn't notice the bodies being crowd-surfed to where the EMTs could get to them, despite the fact that the pictures and videos placed him on the JLG lift-type machine that was well above the crowd, looking down right at the bodies going by. Also, it goes without saying that he didn't stop the concert and ask the crowd to make a hole so the emergency services could get to the victims. Honestly, some other examples of what he's done are equally egregious, as the Astroworld incident. But given he was a bigger name in music when it happened, that one got more media coverage. If I remember correctly, there was a time when he was performing at a college and yelled into the mic for a guy to jump off a frat house balcony onto a table, leaving him paralyzed. I may have the details mixed up on that one, but it sticks out in my mind whenever I hear people bringing up Travis Scott. I'd look into it if you want a bit more accurate description, though. Story 4. Rebecca Gayhart struck and killed a 9-year-old boy crossing a street in June of 2001. Cars had stopped to allow him to cross, and she impatiently drove into the two-way turn lane to go around the cars and hit him. She only received probation and a $2,800 fine. Never give a kind go-ahead to pedestrians. It's a nice gesture, but you can't account for the drivers around you. Other drivers may not see what you're doing, and the pedestrian's attention is now on you, and not the other cars in traffic. It's called the wave of death for a reason. You wave at a pedestrian assuming that no cars are coming, and that wave assures the pedestrian is safe to cross. Except it really isn't. This is why I hesitantly move if a motorist gives me the wave, and do my own due diligence. I literally had to stop on a 2-lane road the other day in suburban/rural Massachusetts to save a stray child wobbling with his little toy lawnmower across the street. He could barely walk, think like 12 to 14 months old, went door to door in the neighborhood asking who he was, and his mom eventually came running down the street screaming and crying. had to have been left on his own for more than 5 to 10 minutes because he walked like 5 houses down the street. If I hadn't stopped, I'm not sure anyone would have, and he was just about to step into the street. Really made me grateful I stopped drinking. Had I not, I'd have probably been buzzed/drunk driving and not seen him or hit him. Hit home because I have a toddler about the same age at home. This is tragic, but hardly the messed up that people are looking for. I see people doing this all the time in my hometown. By the way, when I stop for pedestrians and there are 2 lanes, I purposefully stop diagonally to block both lanes. Some will honk at me before they realize what I'm doing and usually give me an apologetic wave back. I've seen this kind of slap on the wrist before, and I don't understand why vehicular manslaughter doesn't get them prison. If there were intent, it would be vehicular homicide, and without intent, it would still be vehicular manslaughter. But that's still a serious charge, with prison time ranging from a few years to 15. I guess depending on the state. Yet we see people get home detention, probation, community service, etc. Why is it even on the books? And with those ranges of jail time, if this is all you get? I know the context matters, but it seems like that would just matter whether your sentencing was at the low end or the high end. But you kill a child and it's just probation and a small fine and walk away? What? That seems miscalibrated. Story 5. Steven Tyler adopted a 14-year-old girl so that he could sleep with her. Not that it makes it any better, but Wiki states 16 years old. Also, he got her on drugs and forced her to abort because he thought the drugs and smoke might cause birth defects. Courtney Love commented that he did a similar thing to a 13-year-old girl. That woman's sister married into my family. I didn't know this till not crazy long ago, and it absolutely blew my mind. Not really something anyone needed to tell me when I was younger, though. Or frankly, ever. Not exactly a fun story. And Steven is currently going after her for a 6-figure sum after the lawsuit she brought against him was thrown out because it happened decades ago. Yep, that piece of scum is suing her. He fully admitted what he did to her in a book, and now she was going to have to pay the man who R-worded her, statutory, and made her abort the baby at 5 months. I can't even imagine. And everyone still loves the guy. I'm like, what does this piece of shit have to do for people to not love him? And that fire was very suspicious too. Story 6. It will never even be revealed how abusive many directors and stars have been to their actors and guests. Courtney Love said one line about Weinstein almost in jest when half this sub wasn't even conceived, and she got banned from television. Here it is, all of 13 seconds. Watch it. Watch it so you know that even when a person mentions something like this in passing, they might be hinting towards a massively greater danger. It's a lot like how Corey Feldman was a lot more direct about it, and freaking Barbara Walters tried to shame him that he's damaging an entire industry. Yeah, screw you, Barbara. Guess who was proven correct? Nah, screw Corey. He would only say who if he was compensated for it. She was pretty much like, you're damning a whole industry because you're not saying anything. It's almost like if your neighbor said my daughter went for a job interview at a local pizzeria and was sexually assaulted, and the only way said father would give up the name of said pizzeria was if he was paid to. So now everyone in your town pretty much stops supporting all local pizzerias because they don't know who to support. Hate her for a lot of things. This isn't it. Barbara Walters isn't the only cruddy scumbag. I can't find it. Somebody found 4 photos of Oprah Winfrey hugging and kissing various sex offenders, including Weinstein and Drake. And Oprah has made a big deal out of her past victimization, yet she cozies up to those LA scumbags nice and warmly. Story 7. In 1984, Vince Neil of Motley Crue was partying for hours with his friend Hanoi Rocks drummer Razzle Dingley. They ran out of alcohol, so they decided to drive to the liquor store while absolutely blasted. Neil lost control of the car and crashed into an oncoming vehicle, killing his friend Razzle and seriously injuring the occupants of the other car, giving them permanent brain damage. He should have been put away for a long time for murder. Instead, he got a slap on the wrist, 30 days in jail, $2.6 million in restitution, and 200 hours of community service. He didn't even complete the 30 days in jail. They let him out early. 40 years later, Vince is a free man who has committed 2 more DUIs and 5 assaults. 3 of the victims were women. 1 was a sex worker, and 1 was his ex-girlfriend. All while committing the true, unforgivable sin in the eyes of fans by singing really badly. Is this the absolute worst thing a celebrity ever did? No, but it's gross how little people talk about this absolute miscarriage of justice. Then again, I guess who gives a crap about Vince freaking Neil these days? When the OJ verdict came out, a lot of people attribute it to race and jury nullification, while a factor. What they missed is that LA is a company town and the company is Celebrity Inc. The justice system is different for celebrities south of Bakersfield. If OJ and Vince commit the same crimes in Sacramento, they have a hard time. He should have been put away for a long time for murder. Instead, he got a slap on the wrist, 30 days in jail, $2.6 million in restitution, and 200 hours of community service. He didn't even complete the 30 days in jail. They let him out early. I get this is a light sentence for the effect he had on other people's lives, but a murder conviction requires intention to kill. This is manslaughter. Sorry, UK term, not sure what the US equivalent is. Doing so while drunk or impaired in some other way that was within your control, such as texting or being on the phone, can upgrade it to vehicular homicide, which is a much more serious charge. This is sometimes also confusingly called a DUI manslaughter charge. Kinda depends on the state. For example, California has vehicular manslaughter while intoxicated. In other states, you have to prove that you were not only intoxicated but also drove negligently in addition to that. The penalties also vary a lot. I went to a New York Dolls/Poison/Crew show maybe 10 years ago or so. Between songs, Vince Neil said something to the effect of, "In all these years, I can't believe nobody died." Of course, my frame of reference went to Razzle's death, and it took me out of enjoying the show. I actually left. But I was there to see Mick Mars, so the mission had been accomplished. Girlfriend at the time didn't care about MC, so she had to leave early. It felt like such a shameless insult to Razzle. That's absolutely disgusting. Speaking of Mick Mars, their treatment of him has been pretty awful as well, considering his illness. He seemed like the only one in that band who possibly was a halfway decent person, and the stuff I've read makes it sound like the other band members bullied him and treated him horribly. I'm not a fan of the band, but I grew up with their music and read the books about them, the Dirt and Nikki Sixx books, because I like rock autobiographies. Here's my impression of Mick Mars, having only seen him at that one show. He's like a 5'0" small guy, and because of his back barely moved. That said, it was like all the energy in the place was directed at him, and he's sharing a stage with the likes of Vince Neil, Tommy Lee, and Nikki Sixx. It was like they were almost invisible, or just random fans on stage. Whenever I hear stage presence, I think of Mick Mars. It was fascinating. Story 8. A verbal argument ensued and Chris Brown pulled the vehicle over on an unknown street. Reached over Robin F. with his right hand, opened the car door, and attempted to force her out. Brown was unable to force Robin F. out of the vehicle because she was wearing a seatbelt. When he could not force her to exit, he took his right hand and shoved her head against the passenger window of the vehicle, causing an approximate 1-inch raised circular contusion. Robin F. turned to face Brown, and he punched her in the left eye with his right hand. He then drove away in his vehicle and continued to punch her in the face with his right hand while steering the vehicle with his left. The assault caused Robin F.'s mouth to fill with blood, and blood to splatter all over her clothing and the interior of the vehicle. Brown looked at Robin F. and stated, "I'm going to beat the crap out of you when we get home. You wait and see." The detective said Robin F. then used her cell phone to call her personal assistant Jennifer Rosales, who did not answer. Robin F. pretended to talk to her and stated, "I'm on my way home. Make sure the police are there when I get there." After Robin F. faked the call, Brown looked at her and stated, "You just did the stupidest thing ever. Now I'm really going to kill you." Brown resumed punching Robin F., and she interlocked her fingers behind her head and brought her elbows forward to protect her face. She then bent over at the waist, placing her elbows and face near her lap in an attempt to protect her face and head from the barrage of punches being levied upon her by Brown. Brown continued to punch Robin F. on her left arm and hand, causing her to suffer a contusion on her left triceps, sick, that was approximately 2 inches in diameter, and numerous contusions on her left hand. Robin F. then attempted to send a text message to her other personal assistant, Melissa Ford. Brown snatched the cell phone out of her hand and threw it out the window onto an unknown street. Brown continued driving, and Robin F. observed his cellular telephone sitting in his lap. She picked up the cell phone with her left hand, and before she could make a call, he placed her in a headlock with his right hand and continued to drive the vehicle with his left hand. Brown pulled Robin F. close to him and bit her on her left ear. She was able to feel the vehicle swerving from right to left as Brown sped away. He stopped the vehicle in front of 333 North June Street, and Robin F. turned off the car, removed the key from the ignition, and sat on it. Brown did not know what she did with the key and began punching her in the face and arms. He then placed her in a headlock, positioning the front of her throat between his bicep and forearm. Brown began applying pressure to Robin F.'s left and right carotid arteries, causing her to be unable to breathe, and she began to lose consciousness. She reached up with her left hand and began attempting to gouge his eyes in an attempt to free herself. Brown bit her left ring and middle fingers and then released her. While Brown continued to punch her, she turned around and placed her back against the passenger door. She brought her knees to her chest, placed her feet against Brown's body, and began pushing him away. Brown continued to punch her on the legs and feet, causing several contusions. Robin F. began screaming for help, and Brown exited the vehicle and walked away. A resident in the neighborhood heard Robin F.'s plea for help and called 911, causing a police response. An investigation was conducted, and Robin F. was issued a domestic violence emergency protective order. You know, I'll be the first to admit I try to stay in my own little bubble as much as possible, but reading this, I remember when these details first came out and the anger it made me feel. It's one thing to have the thought of rocking somebody, but to actually go through with it, that makes my stomach just twist and turn with disgust. The sad thing is, this isn't even the worst thing that has happened. When you see all the other comments of sexual abuse and taking lives, it's sad, really. The fact that many women to this day I've met are obsessed with him blows my mind. Even crazier is their response when I bring up how he tried to kill his partner when he got upset. I've lost count of how many times I've heard them say something along the lines of, "I'd let him beat me, he's so hot," or "I would totally let him beat me if that was the price to pay to be with him." These people are so blinded by his bone structure, performing skills, and the allure of his money and fame that they are okay with and have normalized his violent past. And not just normalized it, celebrated it to the point of it becoming a common sexual fantasy among his fans. The fact that some women would be alright with violent assault if it means being with an attractive celebrity is disgusting beyond words. It goes to show you how celebrities, famous attractive people, have a different set of rules they get to live by. If you change the circumstances, I doubt any of the women who would gladly be a victim of Chris Brown's violence would feel the same excitement and acceptance if the talented famous man giving them the beating looked like Dan Aykroyd or Mr. Bean. To be fair, I don't think they'd still be attracted to him if he beat them. They just say that to get rid of the cognitive dissonance they face at that moment. However, yeah, people have always excused the behavior of the people that they are fans of, especially if they're not affected by it. A great example is Deshaun Watson in the NFL. Yeah, we as people are not negatively affected by Deshaun, so we focus on him having SA'd and SH'd women. But as far as NFL owners and his peers, he's always been a saint to the women in their lives, so they don't really care about his off-the-field activities. It sucks, sure, but it's a tale as old as time. Story 9. Boxing promoter Don King stomped an employee to death because he owed King $600. Don King paid his daughter to manage Mike Tyson's fan club, which Mike didn't even know about. When he went to the fan club, he found a letter from a mother asking if Mike could call her dying child. He called, and it was a year too late. I believe that the worthless piece of crap Don King actually killed 2 people, if I'm not mistaken. I recall seeing a mugshot from one of his arrests from many decades ago, and he looked like a completely different person. These crimes happened in Cleveland back in the 40s, 50s, or 60s, I think. Don King is also a despicable piece of crap when it comes to being a boxing promoter. From what I recall reading/hearing, a while back he took advantage of Mike Tyson, having Tyson sign contracts when he was not actually able to read what he was signing. If I recall correctly, Don King had Tyson sign away around $300 million of his money to himself by taking advantage of Tyson's inability to read the contracts that he was signing at the time. The sooner that Don King dies, the better. I mean that sincerely. And we're currently seeing every single day on any internet platform anywhere exactly how messed up something like this is. Done so long ago, proves that if you have enough money, fame, clout, legal precedence, you can get away with absolutely anything, and then just continue on being wealthy and extravagant like nothing ever happened. Over and over and over, the psychology of these kinds of people must be interesting as hell to understand. Story 10. Paul Walker was 33 dating a 16-year-old, but the internet never wants to hear that since people blow smoke up his arse since his death. Emmanuel Macron met his wife when he was 15 while she was 40. Now he's the president of France and she's the first lady. Nobody seems to care though. There are a lot of celebrities like this, people like them, so you're not supposed to mention they were dating someone too young. 25-year-old Joel Madden of Good Charlotte, for example, dated a 16-year-old Hilary Duff, nearly a 10-year age gap. Story 11. OJ murdered his ex-wife and got away with it. He freaking wrote a book saying, "I didn't do it, but if I did, this is how I would do it." And apparently, that's just a totally fine and not suspicious thing to do, and he got to be free all of these years. The worst thing about the OJ situation is that everyone pretty much admits that he was acquitted because the black people on the jury wanted to get back at white people for racism. It completely corrupts the justice system and people just sort of accepted it and nothing was done. I was in the 3rd and 4th grade during the trial. All I remember about it was that my mom obsessively watched the trial every day on TV like a reality TV show, and would talk about it nonstop every night at dinner. The day they read the verdict, the teachers wheeled a TV into the hallway at school for us all to watch, sitting on the hallway floor. I was rather disturbed when everyone started cheering and clapping when they said not guilty. I didn't notice how the teachers were reacting over the cheers of 100 stupid children. My next memory of OJ was that he went to play golf the next Mother's Day while his children were at the cemetery. Burn in hell, OJ. I've heard people throw around recently the idea that OJ's son did it, and all of the weirdness since has just been him putting as much heat on himself as possible to pull attention away from his son. It's pretty wild, to be honest, when you look into it. His son had arrests for violent assaults with a deadly weapon, and had well-documented psychological issues, and wrote something in his journal about how he cut his problems out of his life with a knife. Story 12. Coco Chanel was a Nazi spy. She informed on Jewish and homosexual competitors in order to gain a foothold in the European fashion industry. She then used her connection within the fashion industry to pass information through a network of spies for the SS. Coco Chanel was a disgusting and vile Nazi who built her company off the blood and bones of 11 million people. Also, Hugo Boss designed their uniforms, and only apologized because a book revealing this fact was being released. One satisfying footnote, Coco had Jewish business partners, the Wertheimer brothers, who bankrolled Chanel No. 5 and built it into the powerhouse fragrance. They owned the majority of the company, but once the Nazis arrived, Coco tried to take advantage of their policy of seizing Jewish-owned businesses to wrestle control back from the brothers. Anticipating this, the Wertheimers had secretly handed off their stake to a French and Christian businessman before they fled France, so their interests were protected. By 1954, the brothers had full control of Coco's company. I've worked with both Boss and Chanel. I want to make it clear now that Boss speaks very little about their founder and has rebranded to remove his first name, whereas Chanel still treats her like a god. The stores are a shrine to her. In Chanel training sessions, they take you through the history of Coco Chanel, spend ages talking about her childhood and her rise in the fashion industry, and then just skip from the mid-1930s to the 1950s when she's suddenly in Switzerland because of reasons, and swiftly move on. They know what she did, and they intentionally leave it out. It is absolutely disgusting. Story 13. Mark Wahlberg beat an Asian Vietnam veteran unconscious just because he was Asian, and then tried to have his hate crime charges dropped from his record 20 years later. In 1986, a then 15-year-old Wahlberg and 3 friends were charged for chasing 3 black children and pelting them with rocks while yelling, "Kill the N-words," until an ambulance driver intervened. The next day, Wahlberg harassed another group of mostly black children around the age of 9 or 10 at the beach, gathering other white men to join in racially abusing and throwing rocks at them. A seemingly unrelated second incident occurred 2 years later in 1988 when Wahlberg attacked 2 Vietnamese men while high on the drug PCP. He called one man, Van Lam, a Vietnam effing S, and knocked him unconscious with a 5-foot wooden stick, while punching another man, Army veteran Johnny Trin, in the eye later in the same day. Officers reported that Wahlberg used racist slurs to describe both men. I've always thought about this, and that kind of violence is sickening. Kate Moss had to do a photo shoot with Mark Wahlberg for Calvin Klein, and she was saying how rude he was and how uncomfortable he made her. I honestly believe he has a ton of skeletons in his closet. He now hides behind his religion. I don't believe he's a godly man. Obviously only my opinion. Story 14. Alfred Hitchcock is remembered as one of the greatest directors of the Golden Age, but what he did to Tippi Hedren, oh my god. He saw her in a commercial and put her under contract so that he could cast her in his movies, The Birds and Marnie. It was soon obvious he was trying to get with her, and he forced himself on her while they were in his limo and she couldn't run anywhere. He also ordered the other crew members not to socialize with her, and he'd get very annoyed if he saw her talking to another man. Rod Taylor said he was told repeatedly, "Don't touch the girl after I call to cut." Her own daughter, Melanie Griffith, said he wouldn't let her visit her at the studio. In the former, the scene of Melanie being attacked by birds in the upstairs room she described as the worst week of my life. He lied to her that they'd been using mechanical birds, and she arrived on set to find real ones that were then tied to her costume and also thrown at her for the sake of the scene. After nearly losing an eye, she was so distressed that the studio doctor ordered a week's bed rest for her. Hitch tried to stop him, but he was like, "Are you trying to kill her?" And she suspects that this was his way of punishing her for turning him down. During Marnie, he had her followed, made sure her dressing room was next to his with a connecting door, tried to micromanage her career, forced himself on her again in his office, told her he expected her to make herself sexually available to him at all times, and even did creepy things like commissioning a replica mask of her face for himself. It's extremely telling that the film had a scene where her character is essayed on her honeymoon and later falls for the man who did it. Even at the time, everyone told him to change that, saying it was impossible to sympathize with the male lead afterward, but he pushed through. Once it became clear that she wasn't going to return his advances, he blocked the studio from submitting her performance for Oscar consideration, trashed her reputation to anyone who'd listen, and kept her under contract for 2 more years, refusing to let her work with anyone else so that the hype around her had died down by the time it expired. The studios were too afraid to antagonize him, so her career just didn't recover. Hedren herself also has one, although it's more of an extended "wow, are you an idiot?" She wanted to make a film called Roar using real wild animals, as in she wanted 40 lions, and no one in Hollywood would loan them to her. So she adopted them and had them live in her house, with her children. She eventually got a ranch where she rescued even more animals that she then used in the film. The exact number of injuries was never confirmed, but it was at least 70 people who were hurt in the making of that film. Infamously, the director's son getting his head clamped by a lion that held on for about 25 minutes, and he needed 56 stitches afterward. Jan de Bont was the cinematographer and needed 200 stitches after one attack that nearly scalped him. Melanie Griffith, who was still a minor at the time, got mauled by a lion and needed reconstructive surgery, and she became addicted to painkillers afterward, partly because of this. Hedren would later admit what a stupid idea the film was. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you would like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.